Good morning to all of you. In the today's class, I'm going to discuss about servlets. What is a servlet? A servlet is a Java program used to extend the capabilities of server. Servlet technology is used to create web applications. Web applications are executed through internet programming. So internet programming is divided into two parts. The client-side programming and second one is server-side programming. Client-side programming is implemented by using HTML, XML, JavaScript, applets, etc. The server-side programming is implemented by using servlets, PHP, JSP, etc. Servlet API provides many interfaces and classes, including documentations. API means application programming interface. The servlets are not tied to specific client-server protocol. That means the servlets are not specific to any protocols like FTP, HTTPS, WAV, etc. But servlets are most commonly used with HTTP protocol. So these are called HTTP servlets. Execution of servlets consists of 4 steps. Execution of servlets consists of 4 steps. In the first step, the client sends the request to the web server. The second step, the web server interprets it and forward it to corresponding servlets. So whatever the web server receives the internet servlets, that can be interpreted and forwarded it to the corresponding servlet. The servlet process the request and generate output and send it back to the web server. The web server sends the response back to the client and client browser display it on the screen in the form of HTML. For example, you see the diagram. Here is the web browser. Web browser is a client. Any web browser, so that is Internet Explorer, Mozilla Firefox, or Chrome, Internet Explorer, etc. So first, whenever the user send the request to the web browsers, so these web browsers, that request will be sent to the HTTP server through HTTP protocol. This HTTP server analyze the servlets and send the request to the corresponding servlet programming. This servlet programming executes by using resources from the database, and the results will be again sent it to the HTTP server. This HTTP server again send the response to the web browsers through the HTTP protocol. So this is the execution process of servlet. So then the functions of servlets. So that means where the function of the servlets are applicable. So what are the functions of servlets? Servlet, first one, the servlet reads the explicit data sent by the clients. That is HTML forms on a web page, applets, or HTTP client programs. Suppose when the user sends the request to the server in the form of HTML or web HTML applets or HTTP client programs, so then it receives. Servlets read the implicit HTTP request data sent by the client, that is cookies, media types, compression schemes. Later I will go in depth about these cookies, media types, and compression schemes. Servlet process the data and generate the results. So that is connecting to the databases, execution of RMI or protocols or execution of web servers. So computation of response directly. So that means, so Servlet process the data and generate the results. That is connecting to the databases, execution of RMI or Corba calls, and execution of web services, and the computation of the response directly. Servlets send the explicit data to the clients. This document can be sent in variety of formats like text, HTML, XML, binary, that is in the GIF images format, Excel, etc. So Servlets, next step is Servlet sends the implicit HTTP process a response to the client. Type of documents returned, that is XML, text or XML, HTML. Cookies, settings, parameters and caching, etc. So these are the functions of servlets. So the first function is servlets read the explicit data sent by the clients, that is HTML form on a web page or applets or HTTP client program. In the second step, the servlet reads the implicit HTTP request data sent by the client, that is a cookies, media type, compression schemes. Implicit data means here is system is sending this data but not the users. So after that, okay. So Servlet reads the explicit data sent by the client browsers, HTML form on a web page, applets, HTTP client program. Servlets read the implicit HTTP request data sent by the clients, that is the cookies, media types, compression schemes, etc. Servlet process the data and generate results. Connecting to the databases, execution of RMI, Corba calls, and execution of web services, so computation of the response directly. Next step is Servlet send the explicit data to the client. This document can be sent in the variety of forms, that is output, like text, HTML, XML, or binary or XML format. So Servlet sends the implicit HTTP response to the clients. Type of document, return, cookies setting, parameters, and caching, etc. So what are the alternative to the servlets? Suppose if the servlets are not available, so how to implement internet programming? So one is applets, CGA, that is a common gateway interface, JSP, that is Java server page, ASP, that is active server page. First we'll see that what are the differences between applets and servlets. Applet is a client-side program and servlet is a server-side program. That means applet can be executed in the client's server system, whereas server will execute in the servers. So for execution of applets, we must install Java runtime environment in the browsers. If the applet uses, but in this case, if the applet uses advanced features, the old browsers will be failed to execute them. So the servlets runs on the server machine and usually generate simple HTML code as output, which can run on any versions of browsers. The next difference is applets cannot access local resources such as files and databases. So if servlets are configured properly, then they can access system resources. Therefore, servlets are more powerful than applets. What are the differences between CGI and applet program? CGI is an independent program that receives request from the web server and process that request and send the results back to the web server. CGI is one of the common server-side solutions. What are the disadvantages of using CGI? For each request of the client, it creates and starts new process. It creates and start new process. So it is a overhead to web servers. So suppose if the 100 clients are sending request at a time, 100 process should be created and start the 100 process. So then in that case, the server may face some overhead problems. A CGI program needs to be loaded and started for each CGI request. CGI is also one kind of program. Whenever the client is sent the request, the server should load the CGI program and start the execution. So definitely it will take more time. If the number of clients increases, it takes more time for sending the response. So you can see the internet applications. So suppose if the most of the people are simultaneously they are interacting, definitely internet speed will be decreased. So it uses a platform dependent languages, that is C, C++, and Perl. So then definitely, so this is somewhat so the dependent and not independent. For example, you see the diagrams. Here is the 3 requests are sending. So first that is CGI program creates. So first process and shell 1, process shell 2 and process shell 3. This is HTTP data server, right? So then here is, but when you are using the web server, so suppose there is servlet. So here is when you are sending the request, web container will send to the only servlet. Servlet is created only one object. What are the advantages of servlets over CCA? Better performance because it creates a thread for each request, but not process. Portability because it uses Java language. Everyone knows that Java is a portable programming language. So robust. Servlets are managed by JVM, Java Virtual Machines. So need not to worry about memory leakage, garbage collector, etc. Secure. So object-oriented programming. So we know that it is a more secure programming language because it uses Java language. So another one is it uses write once, run anywhere technology. So that is the servlets uses write once, run anywhere technology. Write once means once you create the servlets, it can run on anywhere or any other technologies or any protocols. Java servlets provides excellent framework for server-side programming. So this removes the overhead of creating process for each request. But in the servlets, for each request, you need not to create a separate process. We can create only one object and so the threads will be created so that it avoid the overhead of that CPU. So servlet saves persistent data automatically. So whenever are exiting the program, these servlets automatically saves the, so that is the important configuration of the entire system and persistent data. So these are the main advantages of using servlets over the CGI programming. So that is what is the life cycle of servlets. What is the life cycle of servlet? So that is throughout the life of the servlet, it goes into 3 stages. So one is initialization stage. So second one is servicing or processing stage, and third one is the destroying stage. That every servlet goes into 3 stages. One is initialization of the initial stage, processing stage, and destroying stage. For example, so suppose, so in this life cycle, when the client sends the request to the server, then, so this, so first, then, so that is the servlet engine. The servlet engine checks whether, whether the required servlet is loaded or not. After that, if not loaded, if the servlet is not loaded, it calls the loader class constructor to load the required servlet class. If servlet is not loaded, it calls the loader class constructor to load the required servlet class. After loading the servlets, it calls init method. So after the servlet is loaded, the init method is called. It has the init method. So that is the initialization of servlet. This method is called only once, just before the servlet is placed into services. So suppose throughout the life cycle, so that is init method executes only one time. Inside the init method, the resources used by the servlets are initialized. Whatever resources or parameters or configurations we're using, that can be initialized within the init method. For example, establishing the database connections. So initialization of the parameter or initialization of the configuration of the servlet, etc. This init method takes servlet config object as a parameter. So that is a init method can access only one parameter, that is called servlet config parameter. So that is the next one is after completion of that init method, that enter into the service method. Into the service method, that is the processing stage. The service method handles all the requests sent by the clients. The service method handles all the requests sent by the client. That means it processes all the requests which are coming from the servlets requests from the client. It cannot start service request until the init method is executed. Until the init method is executed. So that is only a single instance of the servlet is created for all the requests. In the service method, only a single object is created for servlets for all the requests. You can send any number of requests. Suppose you are sending 100 requests. 100 requests can use only one object with the multiple threads. The servlet engine dispatches each request in a single thread. The servlet engine dispatches each request in a single thread. The service method is used when extending generic servlet classes. When you are calling the service method, so whenever class is extended with the generic servlet class, so then only we can use service method. So since the servlets are designed to operate in the HTTP environment, the HTTP class is executed. Since servlets are designed to operate in the HTTP environment, the HTTP class is extended. So that means, so if you are implementing the servlets in the HTTP environment, the HTTP servlet class is extended. The service class having two parameters. One is HTTP servlet request, and another one is the HTTP servlet response. So this method examines the request and call the appropriate do-get method or post method. So generally, when you are using the HTTP servlets, instead of using service method, we can call it as a do-get method or do-post method. So the later on I will explain what are the differences between do-get and do-post method. So in destroying method, this method signifies the end of the servlet life. So whenever destroy method reach, then the servlet ends its life. The resources allocated during the init are released. The resources allocated during init are released. So while it enters into the destroy method. Save persistent information that will be used the next time the servlet is loaded. So that means during the destroying process, it saves the persistent information that will be used next time the servlet is loaded. That means, for example, so that is the cookies programming, a configuration of the server or configuration of the systems, and everything will be so that is the save in the server. The servlet engine unloads the servlets. After that, the servlet engine unload the servlet. Calling destroy method yourself will not actually unload the servlet. For example, so when you call this destroy method anywhere, but immediately, so it cannot be executed. Once, so that can be destroy method can be executed by using only servlet. Only the servlet engine can destroy servlet, but we cannot destroy the servlet. Have understood the life cycle of the servlet? So then in this life cycle, so there during the process, it can call any one of the methods. So that is the do get method, do post method, do put method, do head method, do delete method, do trace method, and do options methods. These methods later go in depth about these methods. Okay, right. So this is the life cycle of this one. What is the basic structure of the servlet? Generally, in any programming language, we can see the structure of C programming, a structure of Python programming, structure of Java programming, like that. In the same way, here the servlet is having its own structure. The basics, suppose the servlet, so that is here is the basic structure contains three methods. One is init method, service method, and a destroy method. These three methods are implemented by using class, that is servlet class. It can be extended by using HTTP servlets, because here is we are implementing the web applications. That's why we can go for HTTP servlets, HTTP servlet class. So for example, already I explained that. So init method can be initialized for initialization purpose. Service method is used for processing, and a destroy method will be used for destroying the process. So then you see the simple program, how we can create so the servlet programming by using Java. Here is first thing is we can import. So that is import servlets. So that is the import java.io.star. So that is the input Java IO, all input output statements for reading and writing of the servlets. So next one is import javax.servlet.star. So here is, so we are using, so that is the Java X servlet, that is the extended Java. So that contains the servlet class. This servlet class is having all the classes and interfaces which are used to execute the program. So that is the general servlets. So that's why here is next one is a public class my servlet. So my servlet is a our class name and implements servlets and implement servlets. So that means it is a here is we are using a generic servlets. Here is we are using a generic servlets. So that's why we are using servlets. Extends the servlets. Suppose when we are using the HTTP servlets, we can call it as a we can implement HTTP servlets. So then here is we are initializing one statement that is a let servlet configuration. First one is we are initializing the servlet configuration object to null. So next we can call the init method public void init servlet config and config. Here is